good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are.
Yeah,
Welcome to the Channel Zone podcast. Our guest today, Mr. Earl Talbot. Earl, thank you very much for being with us. How are you?
I'm well, thank you, and thank you for having me. So it's a
Yeah,
pleasure to see you again after a few years.
it's been a long time. As I said, the again, you recently. I think it's worth noting. Now, I said you are a solopreneur, but you're also co-author of actually a kind of best-selling book, which is Leading with Self-Awareness, which is congratulations on that. But our first meeting would have been I think, definitely 20 years ago. If it's 2024 now, coming to the end of 2024, but I think it definitely was in 2004, back in the day. I keep on saying back in the day now. But back then, you were at
Showing your age, Mark. Showing your
Oh
age.
well, absolutely. I hit 60 this year, so back then you were at Pipex at that point, and I was doing a lot of training there. You've been in a number of other tech companies, but I don't want to go into that in too much detail. But a real potted history. Give you 30 seconds, which companies you've been at, and give us a just for the viewers and listeners.
Yeah, so I had a long career in as a sales professional in technology and telecommunications companies. So as you mentioned, it really started in Pipex. Actually, to be honest with you, before that, I was at Hayes Information Management selling magnetic media, which is those DAT tapes that banks and everybody used to use do their backups on.
It was high
Um,
tech back then. It was
yeah,
high
that was
tech.
high tech. That was definitely high tech. So I'm showing my age now, and that when the internet, the wild west of the internet started. I
Mhm.
then got a job in Pipex where you trained me, and then I went to a global company, NTT. I went to Exponentially for a period, and then I was poached and went to an American startup SaaS company, which is one of the things that I said I would never work for. And I went there and yeah, stayed there for 6 months, and then they let me go, and I decided, well, I've been doing this thing for probably about 20 years, so I might as well do it full time and give it a good guise of business rather than a side hustle.
Yeah, got you, got you. I love that word side hustle. That's a Gary V. Is that a Is it? Is it?
I I don't know where it's originated from. I mean, I know he spoke about it, and actually, it's an interesting thing to make a distinction between there is a hobby, there is a side hustle, and there is a side business. And a
Right.
hobby is something that you tend to do that you enjoy, fishing, golf, whatever it is that you like, Lego. A side hustle is something that I see, which is you're not trying to necessarily make it a business or make lots of money from it, but it's something that you can generate some interest and you can get some value back. You're adding
Yeah.
value, and therefore you're getting some value back. And then the side business is really that, which is something that you're developing and growing towards becoming a bigger business at some point. And for me, definitely the work that I was doing was much more sort of side hustle, which was I wasn't necessarily thinking about leaving the corporate world to do this, but what it done is it gave my life meaning and gave me elements of fulfillment that my job
Mm,
couldn't do.
mm, mm. Is it that the job can't do it, or do you think it's just certain jobs can't do it?
Oh, good question. Yeah. So I think it's a number of different things. So one of the things I would say is the limitations of what I consider the corporate matrix. And if you think about the movie The Matrix, the corporate matrix is a state of being where your mindset is systematically deconstructed to make you a good worker bee.
Right.
So you go into the workplace, they take away your own autonomy to an extent, they take away your agency, and you fall into one of the cogs in the machine. So they don't want your creativity, they don't want your innovation, they don't want your unique talents. What they want is for you to do a job that you just fit in seamlessly into the organization. And when you think about it that way, yes, you're getting paid and rewarded, very well, but at the same time, at what cost, what are you giving up? There are other organizations, so I'm not against the corporate world in its entirety. There are other organizations that embrace that innovation, that embrace your unique
Mm,
qualities and
mm.
gifts, and they actually will actively encourage it. And so for those organizations, actually you can get the fulfillment in the job and be rewarded and know that you're having impact. So yeah, you can get it if you know how to find it.
It's incredible what you're saying now. Not. I mean, a few movies to bring in. You mentioned The Matrix. That's one of my favorite movies of all time. And um, but I watched the other day. I watched The Founder. You must have seen that movie anyway. I think, which is about Ray Kroc at McDonald's. But
Yeah.
it's interesting because again, he built a phenomenal organization, and the man was truly inspirational. But if you think about the way you just described there, people, again, McDonald's typically for most people, I suppose, it's one of their first jobs. But you're not allowed to be creative. You're not innovation, creativity. It's probably the best example of, you know what I mean. You basically make milkshakes, and you make a milkshake like this. You don't deviate from it. This you are a human. You also use the physical term cog. You are a
Yeah.
cog in a machine in that point. But for most of us, I think we're probably slightly matrix-like here. We're conditioned from a very early age to expect that to be our role in society, that at some point, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I don't know what your thoughts were. I always used to do it as part of my introduction as a trainer. You know, I wanted to be a rock star. I saw Slade on Top of the Pops in 1972, and it's like I said, I want to be him. Um, didn't work out, and then perhaps like many people, I fell into sales. You could say I failed into sales. The music side didn't work, and originally I sold musical instruments. I could be a little bit creative and I could be innovative, but that was a small family business. But the
Mm.
corporate world, I think, is interesting what you say. Very, very, very interesting. I experienced it. I've worked for myself now for since 1996, so it is 28 years, uh, which I'm very,
Congratulations.
very pleased about. But on the one hand, I did, I thought I was going to be able to build a company. You use the term. I don't think the term existed 20, 30 years ago, but this solopreneur, which I think that kind of I think applies to me. And I think I would see myself effectively self-employed. I often use the term chief cook and bottle washer, which in some respects is a it's a bit cynical, but a solopreneur. You are a solopreneur. Is solopreneurship a trend? Is it on the up?
Yeah, yeah. So really good points, and just backtrack a little bit. So
Yeah.
I actually look at it as we are groomed, and I don't use the word
Yeah.
lightly.
Yeah.
We
No.
are
What do you mean?
groomed into
Yeah.
being these good cogs. So from school, um, where you sit down. Now we know that education system doesn't actually work in the way that it's supposed to work, and
Mm.
children typically are better at learning and absorbing information when they're moving around and doing
Yes.
things, not sitting at a desk trying to focus and concentrate. And that's
Yeah.
because there's a heavy bias on what I would call our cognitive intelligence, so our IQ. And quite often, so the things that we are often focused on is our IQ, our cognitive intelligence, and our physical intelligence, which I also call the somatic intelligence, which also includes your physiology, your emotional intelligence, your intuitive intelligence, and what I would consider your spiritual intelligence. They are often ignored and actually unwelcome in certain places. So we're groomed into being that not
Good
creative, not
citizen. Yeah.
innovative person. And then we've got the social norms, the conditioning that happens in the social norms when you say, I want to be a rock star, that actually the teacher will say, well, don't be silly, think about something. And then your parents will be saying, don't be silly, think about something
Correct.
sensible. And your peers, why don't you do this? So that's the challenge that we have to have. And that's one of the reasons why I'm really focused on resilience. So coming back to your question, I am a solopreneur. And I think I changed the name of my company back in 2017 to Creative Muscle. And Creative Muscle is really the concept or the idea that we are always creating our reality. So whatever you are choosing, whatever decisions that you're making, whatever behavior that you're displaying is contributing to the reality that you are experiencing. And one of the things that I look at is solopreneurs with the technology that we've got at the moment, where you've got apps and platforms that actually can work for an individual. You can
Yes.
actually create a relatively good business that can have impact, that can scale and
Mm.
impact thousands of people, if not millions of people.
Mm.
And you don't need to hire a team or a squad of people. You
Yeah.
can
You're
you
so
can
right.
effectively do it by yourself, and then outsource the things that either you're not good at or
Yes.
really just don't interest you. Yeah, and I think you know what I love about solopreneur, and there's the other way that I frame it, which is solopreneur as in soulopreneur, which has got nothing to do with religion, but it's really about living the life from your essence, living the life that you're born to live is the way that I would describe that.
Right.
Which is I don't want to be stuck in an office. I don't want to have lots of qualifications and have training every month and everything else. I just really want to live a life. I want to go and explore the world. I want to hang out with friends. I want to have impact. I want to use my unique gifts. So if you look at a lot of content providers, graphic designers, you know, which started the whole digital nomad movement, you know, these people that could literally work from a beach in Thailand and everything else, which is great. But I think also the reality is solopreneurship isn't easy. I think it lends itself easier to some people than other people. So one of the things that I've been looking at, and part of my journey, is understanding the impact of neurodiversity. So how does that lead into, I struggled at school, for example, because I'm somewhat dyslexic, and I've probably got some other, as they say now, neurospicy elements that mean that
Neurospicy,
neurospicy, yeah.
as in spicy.
Yeah,
Spice that.
as in
Right.
spicy. Yeah,
Okay.
it's
Oh,
like
right. Okay.
there's different
Hot
flavors of our
sauce. Hot
neurology.
sauce.
Hot
Right.
sauce,
Okay.
yeah.
Neuro sauce. Right. Okay.
Exactly. It's, you know, what's your neuro flavor, to speak, because it's a
Wow.
spectrum. There isn't a normal kind of neurology. There is a box that we fit in, where
Yeah.
society says actually if you're between that range and that range, but it's still a range. And that range is actually shifting. So if you look at what, you know, when you think about
Interesting.
EY and some of the big five consultancies, and they're saying, oh, we're dropping having a college degree now or university degree, and we're looking for people that are much more entrepreneurial and innovative. They're moving that lens. So the norm is actually
Yeah.
shifting. And I think that's one of the reasons why so many people are moving to entrepreneurship and solopreneurship, because
I
they're
mean,
able to live the life that they want, and they just don't fit in that box.
can I don't know if you know the term the Overton window. Have you come across that? So it's the Overton window is generally used in politics, and it's kind of, you know, it's like this is the you might have left and right, but the Overton window is what society is it finds acceptable, what you can
Yeah.
talk about. You can't talk about what's one way, and you can't the Overton, but the Overton window can shift, yeah,
Yeah.
from left to right. But I think it's similar to what you just said on the neurospicy piece as well, in terms of there was the Overton window for corporate behaviour was blue suit, white shirt, red tie, BMW driving, and which I always had to play the game on that. You know, a set of Church's shoes, a Mont Blanc pen, and you know what I mean, and a Rolex wristwatch. Those were part and parcel of the Overton window for salesperson back then. I think I've always been a bit neurospicy. You know, as I always
You
said, I
most
was
definitely, Mark. You've
right.
trained me, and I've known you for many years. You are
Right.
absolutely
So
neurospicy.
the Overton window with me slightly different. I always made a big thing about being 6'3", red-headed Welshman. I don't look so red anymore, but 6'3", red-headed Welshman with one eye, and you know, and even at the age of about 28, 29, possibly around the most at a period when I worked at Service Tech, where I was incredibly effective and successful. Right place, right time. By the way, a lot of it is luck. But I used to wear a bow tie as well. I mean, you've got to have some. So I kind of stood out. But I think what you've just been saying there, maybe the corporate world, perhaps that's one of the things where they now, if you look at, you know, what people wear to work, it has the Overton window has either shifted or maybe it's expanded. Do you know what? It hasn't expanded, it's shifted, because
It's shifted.
you'd look a bit foolish if you went in a pinstripe suit now.
Well, absolutely. I mean, so a couple of things on that. So when I got into the corporate world, I didn't look like most. So that was again in '96.
Yeah.
So as you were just getting out of the corporate world, I was just getting into the corporate world, and and you know, I've got a gold tooth. I'm a black man from South London, 6'1". I'm not small, and I'm lucky that some of the managers that I had gave me an opportunity, because I did not look like my peers. I did not look like the other people in the office. In fact, for a number of years, I was the only black person in the office, and I had a conversation with another sales person, and they were saying, "Well, why don't you get rid of that black your gold
The
tooth?
tooth.
You know, because it stands out and so on and so
Yes.
forth, and it's going to hold you back and everything else." But actually, I embraced it, and I think that's the thing. If we can embrace what makes us slightly different, if we can embrace the elements of us that actually mean that we aren't compromising ourselves and use
Yes.
them as potential, I wouldn't say superpowers, but as resources, I think that gives us an advantage rather than everybody else who's literally cutting off parts of themselves, metaphorically speaking,
Yes.
to
Yes.
fit into and be a good cog in the wheel. So, as you
I could
say,
never do it. I left. I had to
yeah,
leave. I left in '96 because I said I did find it too constraining. It was a straitjacket,
yeah,
and I suppose I was just fortunate is that I was able to quickly find a way where I could make a living for myself as a sales trainer. But so we've got solopreneurship. You mentioned the corporate matrix because I know that's one of your kind of talking points or themes. But the other one that we had touched upon recently was, which I think we both experienced, and maybe a bit of burnout at times.
yeah,
So I think, because I'm just thinking, I think from our conversation so far that I think if I was to when I put this up on YouTube, I think it is the title for this should be it's going to be in some sense kind of life after tech or life after the corporate world. What is kind of out there, but. I'm interested and intrigued because I've been, I think I've kind of been burnt out, very tired, very apathetic at times over that 30-year period. What happened to you, and how did you move through it?
yeah. So I actually hit burnout twice in my corporate career. And the first time was I was in a very highly toxic environment. Again, being that there was only two black people in the department. There was me as a sales professional, and there was a PA, and there was, racist jokes. There was just the uniformed. Everybody's got to look the same, and everybody does the same thing. And a lot of those things, including going to the pub and drinking after work, just didn't really appeal to me.
Right.
And talking about football and all the various different things. But that would also impact on how you were rewarded in terms of bonuses and how, you would,
And
mm,
opportunities. Do you get the
yeah,
leads? Do you get the right
yeah,
accounts?
exactly. What accounts, what leads, and everything else. And it was really, really toxic. Anyway, I left that company and I went to another company, which is even worse. And yeah, I just literally burnt out. And at that point, what I would consider, I went through to complete collapse. So I say there's two different types of burnouts.
Right.
There's complete collapse, and then there's functional burnout. Functional burnout is again a bit like a alcoholic, who can drink and they can still look like and function normally, although they're not functioning normally. They're in that zone of numbing, and that has an effect over time. So you can be chronic with that. Whereas complete collapse is you feel like you've got the flu or you're depressed and you literally are bedridden. You can't
Amazing.
get up. Your adrenals have burnt out. The cortisone levels in your body are just way too high. And yeah, you're apathetic, you're lethargic, you've got brain fog, you just don't have any energy. If you're lucky, because actually for some people, there's some other issues. And I know we've talked about it before about it can manifest in terms of heart issues. It can manifest in terms of an actual disease. And I'm not saying this from a perspective of a doctor. I'm talking about lived experiences that my clients and people that I've worked with have kind of highlighted to me. And the problem is, back in the day, it was called yuppie flu, right? It's just,
I thought that was something different.
yeah, no, I
That
think,
was
I think
burnout, was it?
it's the thing that's kind of just coming around, but they're not, they're not really diagnosable. So you wouldn't necessarily go to the doctor and the doctor will say,
Yes.
you've got burnout like something else.
Yeah.
Some doctors may use that language, but what they'll do is they'll prescribe against the symptom,
Yeah.
but not actually the cause. And
Got
where it
you.
becomes really challenging is the symptoms present themselves in different ways, and also burnout, there's a number of things that can feed into burnout. So it's not just one thing. There's context and there's different symptoms.
Yeah, as I said, I had a heart condition as well, which is hereditary. My father had it. My two brothers have got it as well. So it's but you add that into the mix, and as you
Yeah.
said, it's a and it's probably a different mix for all of us. The results and the response to it, I think, also probably differ. I always thought that yuppie flu is that was that ME as well? Was that because it called ME at some point in the past? I can't.
Yeah,
I,
then there is an element of Emmy, but again, I think what was happening was again, it's kind of there isn't a definable thing
right,
necessarily. So
right.
some people had ME at that end of the scale, and some people were going through what I would consider burnout.
Burnout. Yeah, yeah. So, and is burnout was it always there? Is it at the same rate, or do you think it's trending up or trending down, or no difference?
I would say my take on this is I think it's trending up.
Hmm.
I think the reason why it's trending up is because the lifestyle that we're living as humans right now is really changing. So, for example, when we were hunter-gatherers, we would feel stressed, but we would feel stress from, hunting, going on the hunt, or, not being, avoid being attacked by wild animals or whatever. So what would happen is our stress responses would go in spikes.
Yeah.
It'd be up, high stress, adrenaline dump, so on and so forth, and then it would go down. The body would flush it down and whatever. So even if it's a life-threatening scenario, you would just get this flush of adrenaline, but then your body would process it and dump it. We live in a time when actually most of our challenges are not life-threatening. What they are, they're bills. They're worried about what the boss is going to say. Am I going to win or lose this deal or whatever it is? But what that does is it creates a layer of chronic stress that our body isn't designed to cope with. On top of that, we've got doom scrolling. We've got what's going on in politics. We've got access to information all over the world. So we are consuming so much information that I looked at a report the other day. We consume as much information in one day as a well-educated man would have consumed in his lifetime, kind of 500 years ago,
Yeah,
right?
undoubtedly. Even
Yeah.
even less than that, I would say. It was
It-
only the people who had a library, maybe, and if you remember, even a newspaper was. I remember reading how there was a big movement. I don't know if you're aware of the self-improvement movement, personal development movement. I think it was Samuel Smiles, I think his name, in the Victorian times. So in the Industrial Revolution kind of era, and at that point, one person in the village would have a newspaper, but there'd be a whole club of people who would all want to have access to that. That was the only
yeah.
information that you could get, and I can spend the first 2 hours of the day on X, going through Twitter, and the information that I'm taking in is extraordinary. I mean, I do wonder. I personally, I think I'm following a good bunch of people. I think it's actually helpful because I just think the sheer brain power of the people I'm reading tweets from. I think it's kind of good for me in many respects. But I understand exactly what you say. I understand the concept of doom scrolling. But I think I avoid that. I'm well aware of the dangers, but the potential that is always there for that. But so I said, all of that change. Can I put another part into it there? Then on because we haven't spoken about this before, but I'm intrigued about your thoughts on what happened during the COVID lockdown, the whole kind of work from home period, that 3 or 4 years. What's your thoughts on how that has impacted
Yeah. I call
people?
that the Great Reset.
Right.
I think overall it was a positive thing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I think overall it was a positive thing. Not so much how governments and institutions necessarily handled it,
Yeah.
but I think it was an opportunity for individuals
Right.
to reflect on their life, what's important in their life, get more time with addressing the scenarios that's happening in their life. So, for example, and unfortunately, things like domestic violence went up, which is, never good. But what also happened was people looked at, actually, I'm in a relationship that I don't want to be in anymore, right? Because before that, you were ships that passing in the night. So people could actually make conscious, intentional decisions about, do I want to be in this relationship anymore? Or actually, for me, one of the things was, I haven't been present enough with my family. The key thing was, I think as an individual, it was time and space for us to really reflect and kind of see what's important. And I think out of that, a lot more solopreneurs and people with entrepreneurial ideas have also blossomed, because they were on furlough leave, or they got
Yeah.
made redundant, and there wasn't somewhere else for them to really go out
Yeah.
and try and
Yeah.
get a
And
job.
I'm seeing a rise, is it of this fractional CMO or fractional CRO, or that is a subset in some respects, isn't it? It's certainly
Yeah.
aligned to solopreneur. And these are probably people who've been in the corporate world. I'm guessing for many of them, they might be getting, I don't know, maybe in their mid-30s, but maybe in their 40s. They've had a good career, and they can, in some respects, if you think about it, they've got some leverage there. They can take what they've learned in that time, and then they can package it up, and maybe they can work 2 or 3 days a week rather than 5 days a week. And
Yeah.
as long as the contracts are coming in, they can do very well for themselves.
Look, think about it this way, Mark. Most people, and I worked in the corporate world for long enough. Most people are probably operating between 40 and 60% of their capacity in the workplace,
Hmm.
right? I know as a salesperson, there were times when in certain jobs and certain roles, I could still hit my target and still go and have a 2-hour lunch with my mates down at the pub and go to the gym and do various different things.
You were
It
allowed to
wasn't,
do that back then, though. That was, as you said, as long as you were doing your number, it was kind of accepted. I don't know if it is anymore.
yeah, exactly. Whereas later on, that was very much no. If you're not in a meeting, you're in the office. If you're not at a client, actually at a
Uh,
client meeting, you're in the office.
yes,
So I
yeah,
think there's a number of things there. I think organizations, and we're seeing this with the mass layoffs as well, organizations really understand that they don't probably need as many people to do and run the company that they need to. And even in some of the key roles, they don't need someone there full time. And actually, that I think makes real sense. And if you can get it to work for you and it works for the company, if you've got more freedom, time to spend with your family on the golf course, whatever it is, make money, pay the bills, and do what you love to do, and you don't have to spend all your time in the office, that's a win-win scenario. And
yeah.
so, whilst I see some of the challenges and some of the things that don't work well, I think in any of these, there's an opportunity to see what can work for you and how that can work for you.
Yeah, and say if you're given the opportunity to do it, it's been great for me. It has been a challenge over the years. It hasn't all been smooth. I've
No.
had peaks and troughs, and yet, as I said, I wouldn't I wouldn't have it any other way. And then the other topic that and I don't know, is this your raison d'etre at the moment, or your super spice, or your superpower? Is this the your focus on? And you've done a tremendous job, by the way, of explaining all of these other areas that we've looked at here. But resilience is the one that I think I'd kind of seen cropping up on your LinkedIn
Yeah.
kind of posts comes up. So again, I'm assuming you got your finger on a pulse to your audience. Uh, that's a big issue right now. Then, yeah,
Yeah, so there's so much in this. So one of the things is the golden thread. When I look at what I've been doing in terms of what was my side hustle, then my side business, and now my full business, was resilience. It was called different names. I was talking about eliciting the entrepreneurial spirit, being like a super solopreneur. But when I actually modeled, some part of my background is in neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, and one of the things that we would do is we would model excellence. What's the difference that makes a difference with somebody? So if you see a salesperson that's absolutely smashing their target consistently, I would go model that. It's like, well, what's the thing that they're doing that is actually making the difference? Not the superstition, not the thing that, oh, they wear a red tie and they, whatever it is. It's like, no, they actually structure their deals this way. They plan their year by a quarter, not by what are the things that they do that are quite tangible. And when I looked at it, what is it that makes a successful entrepreneur? The key ingredient is resilience. But here's the thing, resilience isn't a thing, it's a system of things.
Right.
So entrepreneurs who would fail 4 times, be bankrupt 4 times, not just fail, bankrupt 4 times.
I believe that in the US, that's quite common, wasn't it? I mean, it was kind of, if you hadn't gone bust once, nobody wanted to invest. They wanted to see that you had the ability to get up, dust yourself down.
Exactly. Exactly. So, and there is an element of neurospicy in that for me, which is they don't see that as a defining moment for them, which is I'm a loser, I'm lost, or whatever it is. They kind of say, wow, like that was crazy. I've learned so much and now I'm going to take that and move to the next thing. And actually companies are looking for that right now. So one of the challenges that I see is Gen Zs, because they haven't grown in a way that many people have. So their access to resilience and qualities of that resilience, I think, is a little bit more challenging. So they try to shift gears, move into a different company culture. And I'm talking about this from a perspective of Gen Zs that I've worked with and mentored and coached.
How old is Gen Z? You just so they are people born after 2000 type thing, is it? Or right. Yeah. So again, as you said, their lives. We were brought up. I used to play in a disused coal mine as a child. It's hard to believe, and rough and tumble was part of the course. And also, we probably would have had a lot more bullying and all sorts of things that taking place back then. My guess is maybe there's more intervention from teachers and parents now in those areas. But it probably, my upbringing toughened me up in some respects, and it was a case of, as I said, I had to be able to dust myself down and kind of crack on with it. I've got a book that I wanted to. Have you ever come? I don't know the name of the author, but as you were mentioning resilience, the adversity quotient. I don't know if you've ever come across that book. I'll send you the details on it. I was quite affected by that. I'm thinking maybe 15 years ago. A similar thing. He used to say there are broke people down into 3 categories. There are quitters, campers, and climbers. So if you imagine, the people who kind of give up, the quitters, campers who just want to kind of course through, and climbers. But adversity and the resilience is partly your ability to overcome adversity, isn't it? I mean,
I think that's one aspect, that's one dimension. Right. And I talk about 3 different dimensions. So the first dimension is what I call 1.0, resilience 1.0, which is your fight, flight, freeze. So if through your back window a panther jumped through, you'd either maybe try and fight that panther.
South London sounds pretty awful to me, but we don't have that in Hertfordshire.
You don't have that. But
a window cleaner might appear.
Yeah, exactly. But you would do something that is instinctual and reactive, and that is a way that we would try to just preserve and survive. And that's a form of resilience in a way. So sometimes those decisions to keep climbing isn't necessarily, this is what I want to do because it's going to help me grow. This is what I need to do to save my life. But you do that enough times, you get a level of resilience. Yeah. And it always doesn't have to be a kind of a physical threat. Sometimes it can be in spaces where you're not psychologically safe as well. The 2 points.
It could be for a performer, somebody getting up to sing or speak in public. You know what I mean? That's
Exactly. And then 2.0 is entrainment. It's doing the tough things. So some people will actually now go and take lessons to perform on stage, or they will do stand-up training, stand-up comedian training, because they're presenting, they're doing public speaking. So they want to do the tough things. They want to be booed and heckled because that will prepare them for when they're on the big stages. So entrainment is when we actively seek out those
Oh,
adverse situations to help us develop.
again, very NLP.
Yeah. So this is how you start to break it down.
Yeah.
But I talk about then the next step of that is resilience 3.0, which is a much more holistic approach. This isn't just about, so it's not one or the other. It's you have to have 1.0. And actually, with chronic stress, one of the things I do with, I help my clients with, is you need to calm the nervous system. So if you're always in fight, flight, freeze, survival mode, you're going to find it really struggle to do anything that's quite generative and proactive.
Right.
So even entrainment becomes an issue because you're too busy trying to survive. Then you also do, you seek out some of those experiences where it's not necessarily doing things that are hard, because some people enjoy doing hard things. Some people like getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning and going for a run. It calms their mind, it calms their nervous system. So it's doing the things that you don't like doing as well. So it's not just doing a hard thing, it's doing the thing that you would struggle with. So if your thing isn't running, then, go and do some running. If your thing isn't swimming, you're not good at swimming, you don't like swimming, then maybe do some swimming, because that will rewire the brain. And 3.0 is really about getting a holistic approach. So it's starting to get those practices, those rituals, the systems, the relationships that support you. So for example, there's a great story about Michael Jordan in, I think it was game 6 of the three-peat. And he had the flu. He might have been food poisoning. He had the flu. And he called his coach. And this wasn't his basketball coach. This was his kind of
Right. Okay.
psychology
Yeah.
coach.
Yeah.
And he said, look, this is what's going on. And he said, look, just show up. Michael Jordan ends up hitting the game-winning shot. Now, what's interesting about that is he had prepared himself. He knew who to call in the morning. He had someone to call and he knew who to
Right.
call. And that person was there enough to be present. So it's not just, I've got the physical ability. It's knowing who you got, what are the systems that you've got in place, that you've done the entrainment, you've done the practice, you've got the psychological and mental strength, but you've got those systems around you. So even if, when we was talking at the beginning, actually before the podcast started, having a virtual assistant, having a virtual board of directors, people who hold you accountable, having a good accountant, because guess what, you're not good at figures and you need to look at the money, it's having that whole system. And so as entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, or anybody who wants to be really successful, you've got to have that real holistic approach. And coaching is one of the things that I definitely say people.
Do you, because as you were doing that, I like the 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. And again, I like this kind of rule of 3. I mean, if I kind of see it, visual thinker, visual communicator, I see it as like a Maslow's hierarchy in some
Exactly.
respect, like a layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. And I don't know whether you'd see whether, not necessarily, because level 3 is not necessarily self-actualization as it would be in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. By the way, Maslow never did define it in a pyramid. The pyramid was done by somebody else. He just had his list. It was these different parts of the hierarchy. But I think for most people, and one of the reasons why the Maslow's hierarchy of needs is so well understood and so well known is because of the visual representation of it. And I don't know whether you take because you've got some really good analysis here and some insight into these topics. I don't know whether you have visual representations for them.
I do, but there isn't one that kind of covers everything because it's so dynamic. So I don't see it as a pyramid. I see it as an ecosystem.
Yeah.
And there is an interplay of that ecosystem because we're dynamic people. So even with my clients, I can't really say, right, this is where it needs to happen and this is what it means for you to get there, because every client has a different persona. Some are trauma informed. Some have had traumatic situations. Some are trauma informed. And I'm not a therapist, by the way, but what that just means is the work that I do with them, I have to take those things into consideration because everybody's starting from a different point. And so where do we need to shine the light? What's the area? So if you're always in flight or freeze mode, then you're going to have a challenge to even start to think about doing the entrainment stuff. That might be overwhelmed for you. Whereas you've had somebody who's had somewhat of a privileged life, actually, they've never really gone into survival mode. So actually, they're so comfortable and so much in their comfort zone. They do a difficult thing. Why would I do a difficult thing?
Yes, yes. It does make, I have wondered sometimes because, you know, I come from South Wales, as I said, from Gorsain, a mining town. My father's a plumber, my mother was a dinner lady. I went to the bog standard kind of comprehensive, and through strange kind of circumstances, but ended up, well, meeting what my wife, as she is now, Wendy. We've been married for 37 years. I moved from Swansea and came up here. But I do sometimes. So I've always had that the awareness of not having a safety net, of the safety net not being there. And I think for many, maybe there's more than a safety net. There's a giant bouncy castle for them to kind of to fall back on if it was required. It makes it a very different worldview. I think a paradigm undoubtedly is would be different as a consequence. And I said, but I don't resent mine. I've considered it at times, but I don't resent it. Actually, as I said, I think it's through that. That's where I got my spiciness from. That's where that was developed. Because it's often been said, doesn't it? Actually, you have to. Some beautiful people don't really develop great personalities because they haven't had to. You know what I mean? They can walk the room and everybody gravitates towards them and remembers them. But for those of us who don't necessarily have that, we've had to develop some, and I would class them as gifts in some respects. But I think I'm going with neurospicy from this point on. I'm gonna. I don't know if you've copyright. I will. I promise you. I'll credit you whenever I refer to it.
No need to credit me because it's not mine. But I just want to touch on something really important that you said there. And the biggest difference between somebody who is able to overcome the challenges or rewrite the history books in terms of their life story and what got them to where they are and where that's taken them, is that person who's able to reclaim their narrative. Right. So some people look at, this is what happened to me in life. So all these things happened to me and this is now why I'm a victim, or this is the reason why I'm not the person that I want to be. Another person can take that exactly same situation, same environment, and we see this all the time, and they say, wow, that's really amazing. I've put a post on LinkedIn today by Dean Forbes, and Dean Forbes, who's a black entrepreneur. He's now a billionaire. I think he was named as Forbes' most influential, I don't know if it's entrepreneur or black entrepreneur or whatever it is, in the UK this year. And he's come from humble beginnings, and he's talking about those humble beginnings that allowed him to be somewhat diverse. So I was saying, Dean Forbes, he talks about that adversity, how that adversity has made him the man that he is today.
Yes.
So just an element of how do you reclaim your story in a way that it's empowering rather than disempowering. So the difference of this happened to me, or this rather than this is happening for me.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's a key distinction. And that's one of the things that I definitely help my clients kind of start to figure out their mindset. And I think that's the important thing about these conversations. And, you know, whether it's on the podcast or it's in your daily life or whatever it is. And I just quickly, I've got an acronym called HARSH. And HARSH stands for Humble Acceptance and Radical Self-Honesty. So humble acceptance is really just about accepting your situation, your conditions and everything as they are without judgment, blame, or anything else. It is what it is right now. As we like to say in Jamaica, everything is everything, or everything is everything. Oh. Everything is everything.
So look, we'll bring it to a close here now. Earl, we will continue the conversation in many different strands, on and offline. But we'll definitely be having you back on here at some point in the not too distant future. It's been great. Thanks ever so much for coming on, and I'll
Thank you
see
so
you
much
again
for having me.
sometime. Cheers, buddy.
Thank you.